Emma Lewis never expected her body to give up so suddenly. One moment she was standing in her kitchen trying to finish a report before work, and the next, her vision blurred and the world went dark. When she woke up, bright hospital lights surrounded her, and the steady beep of a heart monitor echoed in her ears. Confusion mixed with fear as she tried to remember what happened. Her throat felt dry, her body weak, and before she could move, a calm voice spoke. "Don't try to sit up yet. You're safe now." Emma turned her head and saw a man in a white coat standing beside her bed. His name tag read Dr. Ethan Cole. He had kind eyes, a reassuring smile, and a calm presence that instantly made her feel less afraid. "You fainted at work," he explained gently. "Your blood pressure dropped from exhaustion and dehydration. Nothing serious, but your body was telling you to slow down." Emma managed a small smile. "That sounds about right. I've been working too much lately." Dr. Cole nodded. "You're not the first patient I've told that to. The difference is whether you'll listen." His voice carried both warmth and quiet authority, the kind that made her want to follow his advice without argument. Over the next few hours, Emma was moved to a private room. The hospital felt quiet, the walls painted in soft colors, sunlight coming through the window. She watched nurses come and go, but her attention kept returning to Dr. Cole. He came by more than once to check on her, each time with the same calm smile and professional care. He didn't rush, didn't speak in complicated medical terms. He made her feel human, not like another case. That evening, he walked in again, holding her test results. "Everything looks good," he said, placing the papers on the table. "You just need rest, water, and less stress." I gave a weak laugh. "If you can prescribe a way to avoid stress, I'll take it." He smiled. "If I could, I'd prescribe it to half the city." For a moment, his professional tone softened, and she saw a glimpse of the person behind the doctor's coda. Man who cared deeply about his work and the people he treated. After checking her vitals, he looked at her again. "You'll recover fast, but only if you take this seriously. Promise me you'll rest." Emma nodded. "I promise, doctor." He gave her a gentle smile before leaving, and for some reason, that small act stayed with her long after he was gone. She didn't understand why a stranger's kindness could make her chest feel so warm. Maybe it was because, for once, someone was genuinely looking after her without expecting anything in return. That night, as she tried to sleep, Emma thought about her life. She lived alone in a quiet apartment, her days filled with work and deadlines, her evenings with silence. It had been years since she had allowed herself to slow down. Yet here she was, lying in a hospital bed, realizing that maybe being strong all the time had finally caught up with her. The next morning, sunlight filled the room and Dr. Cole was back. He asked how she was feeling, listened carefully, and adjusted her treatment. Every word he spoke carried patience and care. Emma noticed how he made everyone around him feel calm: the nurses, the patients, even the worried families in the hallway. There was something deeply comforting about him, something steady in a world that often felt too fast and uncaring. As the days passed, Emma began to look forward to his visits more than she wanted to admit. They talked about small things: coffee, weather, her favorite books, his long work shifts. Their conversations were short but always sincere. She laughed more in those few days than she had in months. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but there was something in the air, something gentle, like the first warmth of spring after a long winter. One afternoon, she woke from a nap to see him sitting by her bed, writing notes. "You were dreaming," he said quietly, when he noticed her eyes open. Emma blinked. "Was I talking in my sleep?" "A little," he admitted with a soft laugh. "You said something about coffee." She chuckled, embarrassed. "Well, that sounds like me." He smiled, looking at her for a moment longer than usual before turning back to his notes. "You'll be discharged soon. Your body's healing well." "Thanks to you," she said sincerely. He shook his head. "You did the healing. I just helped a little." There was a pause, one that felt heavier than the words that followed. Neither of them said what they were thinking, but the air between them was full of unspoken understanding. She wanted to thank him properly, not just for the treatment, but for the way he made her feel seen. That evening, before leaving for the night, he stopped by her room once more. The lights were dim and the room felt peaceful. "Try to get some rest, Emma," he said gently. "No more late night work, all right?" She smiled. "You sound more like a friend than a doctor." He met her eyes and replied softly, "Sometimes caring is part of the job." After he left, Emma lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her heart strangely full. She wasn't falling for him, not really, but she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Trust. The kind of trust that makes you breathe easier. Knowing someone truly cares. By the time her discharge day came, she almost didn't want to leave. The nurses handed her the paperwork, and Dr. Cole came in one last time to review her instructions. He stood by the door, holding her file, looking slightly more serious than usual. "Remember what I said? Take care of yourself, eat well, rest. And no more skipping meals. I'll try my best," she promised. He smiled again, but this time it was softer, almost personal. "Good. You're stronger than you think, Emma. Don't forget that." She nodded, and for a moment, they just looked at each other, both unsure how to say goodbye. Then he extended his hand. "Take care, Miss Lewis." She shook it, feeling the warmth of his touch, brief but comforting. "Thank you, Dr. Cole, for everything." When she stepped outside into the cool air, the world felt different. The noise of the city returned, but her heart was quieter somehow. She glanced back at the hospital building and smiled faintly. Meeting him had been unexpected, but it made her realize something important sometimes. Life brings the right people when you least expect it. People who remind you to slow down, to breathe, to care again. As Emma walked away. She didn't know if she'd ever see Dr. Ethan Cole again. But deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. Something in his eyes told her that their story had only just begun. A month after leaving the hospital, Emma Lewis's life had mostly gone back to normal. The office, the endless deadlines, the quiet evenings, it all felt the same. Yet there was something missing. Or maybe someone. Every now and then when she passed by St. Clair's Hospital, she thought of Dr. Ethan Cole. She would remember his calm voice, the kindness in his eyes, and the way he made her feel seen when she was at her weakest. She told herself it was just gratitude, nothing more. Still, his face kept appearing in her thoughts at the oddest moments while she made coffee, read a book, or drove home through the city lights. One morning, Emma decided to take a break from her usual routine. She stopped at a small coffee shop downtown, the kind that smelled of roasted beans and cinnamon. She sat by the window, lost in her thoughts, when she suddenly heard a familiar voice behind her. "Emma." She froze, then turned, and there he was, Dr. Ethan Cole. Holding a cup of coffee, wearing a light gray jacket, and that same calm smile she remembered. For a second, she just stared, caught between surprise and something warmer. "Dr. Cole," she said, standing up quickly. "I didn't expect to see you here." He laughed softly. "Ethan, please. And I could say the same about you. You look much better than the last time I saw you." She smiled. "I've been following doctor's orders." "That's good to hear," he said, sitting across from her when she invited him to join. Most people forget everything the moment they walk out of the hospital. Their conversation began with polite talk, work, health, and small details, but it soon shifted to something deeper. They found themselves laughing, sharing stories about their past, and talking about the struggles of growing older alone. Emma told him how her job consumed most of her time and how hard it was to make real connections anymore. Ethan admitted that being a doctor sometimes felt lonely. It was easy to care for others, but difficult to let anyone care for him. There was an easy rhythm between them. The kind of comfort that doesn't come often, not even with friends you've known for years. 2 hours passed before either of them noticed. Emma blinked at the clock and laughed. "You must have patients waiting." "I do," he admitted, glancing at his watch, but somehow this was worth being late for. She felt a warmth rise to her cheeks, surprised by his honesty. "You're terrible at being professional outside the hospital." "Doctor, maybe that's a good thing," he said lightly, when they stood to leave. Ethan hesitated, then said, "It was really nice seeing you again. Emma, you look happy." "Do I?" she asked softly. "Yes," he said, meeting her eyes. "You should try to keep it that way." They said goodbye, and as she watched him walk away, Emma realized something had shifted inside her. It wasn't just admiration anymore. It was the quiet beginning of affection, the kind that sneaks up slowly but stays deeply. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him sitting across from her, listening with genuine care. She told herself it was harmless. He was just someone who reminded her what kindness felt like. But her heart didn't believe it. Days turned into weeks, and though they didn't meet again immediately, she found herself thinking about him often. Sometimes she caught herself checking her phone, wondering if he might somehow message her even though she knew he didn't have her number. It was silly, she told herself. Still, she couldn't help it. Then one rainy Saturday, fate stepped in again. Emma was standing under an umbrella near the parking lot of a grocery store, waiting for the rain to slow down. A car pulled up beside her, and the window rolled down. "Emma, need a ride?" She turned, shocked again to see Ethan smiling at her through the window. "You're everywhere," she joked. "Maybe the city just keeps throwing us together," he said. She hesitated for a moment, then got in the car. The inside smelled faintly of mint and coffee. As they drove, the sound of rain filled the silence until Ethan spoke. "I didn't think I'd see you again after that coffee shop." "Neither did I," she admitted. "But I guess life has a sense of humor." They laughed, and the conversation flowed as easily as before. By the time he dropped her off at her apartment, the rain had stopped, and neither of them seemed ready to say goodbye. "Would it be completely inappropriate?" Ethan said carefully, "if I asked you to join me for coffee again? Off the record this time. As friends." Emma smiled, her heart racing a little. "Friends sound nice?" Their second coffee wasn't accidental. They met at a quiet cafe near the park, and what was meant to be a short meetup turned into hours of conversation. They spoke about their dreams, regrets, and the things they rarely told anyone. Ethan told her he once wanted to be a writer before medicine became his path. Emma confessed she used to paint but hadn't touched a brush in years. "You should start again," he said softly. "The world needs more beauty, especially from people who feel deeply." "Do you always say things that sound like they belong in a movie?" she teased. "Only when I mean them," he replied. His eyes warmed. Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten. She wasn't used to this kind of connection, gentle, sincere, and patient. There was no rush, no flirting, just quiet understanding. Yet, beneath the calm, there was something unspoken. Something both of them felt, but didn't dare to name. When the evening ended, Ethan walked her to her car. The sky was painted with soft orange light. "Take care of yourself, Emma," he said, his voice lower than usual. "You deserve to be cared for." She smiled, trying to ignore the sudden rush of emotion. "You really mean that, don't you?" "I do," he said. As she drove away, Emma's hands trembled slightly on the wheel. It wasn't love not yet, but it was something real, something rare. That night, she stood by her window, looking out at the city lights. Her heart was full of questions she couldn't answer. Why did she feel this way about someone she barely knew? Why did his presence make her feel safe and alive at the same time? And yet, beneath all her thoughts, there was one truth she couldn't ignore. She trusted him. From the first moment she met him, she had trusted him without hesitation. But as she stood there in the quiet of her apartment, a single thought crossed her mind, leaving her both hopeful and afraid. What if this connection, as beautiful as it was, wasn't meant to last? Because deep down, Emma knew that some stories start in places where they're not supposed to end, that made them even harder to forget. Weeks passed. But Emma couldn't push Ethan from her mind. Every morning when she poured her coffee, she thought of him. Every time she walked past the hospital or the cafe where they had met, she felt a quiet ache in her chest. She didn't want to admit it, but something about him had changed her. He had reminded her what it felt like to be cared for, not in a dramatic way, but in small, meaningful gestures. Yet, She also knew he was a doctor, a man with rules, responsibilities, and boundaries she wasn't sure she should cross. Still, life has a strange way of finding its own path. One evening, as Emma sat at home reading, her phone buzzed. She looked down and froze. The message was short, but enough to make her heart race. "Emma, this is Ethan. I hope you're well. I was wondering if you'd like to meet for dinner sometime." "Just as friends," she read it twice before replying. Her fingers trembled as she typed, "I'd like that." They met the following evening at a quiet restaurant near the river. The place was small, warm, and softly lit. When she walked in, Ethan stood up from the table, smiling in that calm, steady way that always made her feel safe. "You look wonderful," he said sincerely. "Thank you," she replied, smiling back. "You look different outside of the hospital." He laughed. "Less serious, I hope." The conversation started, lightly talking about work, friends, and how fast time seemed to move lately. But as the evening went on, their words grew deeper. There was a comfort in their honesty, the kind that comes from trust. Emma found herself sharing stories she hadn't told anyone in years about her parents' divorce, her lonely childhood, and the way she had built her life around independence to avoid being hurt again. Ethan listened carefully, never interrupting. When she finished, he said quietly, "You've carried a lot on your own." She shrugged, looking down. "It's easier that way. No one can disappoint you if you don't expect much." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes gentle. "But that's not living, Emma. That's surviving." His words hit her deeper than she expected. She didn't reply right away. There was something in the way he said her name that made her feel exposed, but safe. After a moment, she asked, "And you? What about you, Ethan? You seem like someone who gives too much of himself." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I do. It's part of the job, I guess. Caring for people, fixing what's broken. But sometimes," he paused, searching for words, "sometimes I forget that I'm human too, that I can't fix everything or everyone." She looked at him with quiet understanding. "You don't have to fix everything. Sometimes being there is enough." For a long moment, neither spoke. The restaurant faded around them. The world felt smaller, softer. It wasn't romantic in the usual sense. There were no grand gestures or bold words, but it was real. And that made it powerful. After dinner, Ethan offered to walk her to her car. The night air was cool, the streetlights casting soft golden light on the quiet road. When they reached her car, they stopped, neither ready to end the evening. "I'm glad we did this," Emma said. "Me too," Ethan replied. "It's been a long time since I've had a night like this. No rushing, no responsibilities, just connection." She smiled. "That's exactly how I feel." For a moment, they just looked at each other, caught between wanting to say more and knowing they shouldn't. Then Ethan said softly, "You make people feel safe, Emma, even me." Her heart ached at the sincerity in his voice. "And you make people feel seen, Ethan. That's rare." He hesitated, then stepped back slightly, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe we met for a reason." "Maybe we did," she whispered. He didn't reach for her hand. He didn't try to cross any line. Instead, he gave her a quiet smile, the kind that said everything words couldn't and added, "Take care of yourself, Emma. Promise me that." "I will," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. When she drove away that night, her eyes stung with unshed tears. She didn't understand why she felt so emotional. It wasn't sadness exactly, it was something more complex. Maybe it was the feeling of finding someone who understood her soul, but knowing she couldn't have him. Over the next few days, their conversations continued through messages, simple, kind exchanges that brought small sparks of joy to Emma's routine. Ethan would ask if she had eaten, or remind her not to overwork herself. She teased him about being too responsible. He would reply with something that always made her smile. But beneath their words was a quiet longing they both felt but didn't speak of. One night, after a long day, Emma sat on her couch staring at her phone, rereading one of his messages. It said, "Don't forget that taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary." She smiled softly and replied, "You really believe that?" A moment later, his answer came, "I believe it for you." That message stayed with her all night. It wasn't romantic or dramatic, but it was deeply personal. It reminded her that caring could be gentle, not overwhelming. That affection didn't always have to be loud. As days turned into weeks, Emma realized something had changed. She wasn't lonely the way she used to be. She woke up feeling lighter, her heart filled with something new, hope. Yet with that hope came fear. What if this fragile bond broke? What if it was nothing more than a momentary connection? Still, she couldn't deny what was happening inside her. Ethan had become part of her thoughts, part of her days, part of her healing. She didn't know if he felt the same way. But every time he said her name, every time he sent a kind message, she felt that he did one Friday evening as she sat by her window watching the sunset. She whispered to herself, maybe this is love the quiet kind. The kind that grows in small moments, not grand ones. She didn't need to be told. She knew it in her heart. Ethan had entered her life when she needed someone steady, someone kind, and she had trusted him completely. But even as she admitted her feelings to herself, she also knew the truth: he was still her doctor, and there were lines that couldn't be crossed. Still, as she stared at the darkening sky, she couldn't shake the feeling that some things were meant to find their way, no matter the rules. Because love, she thought, doesn't always ask for permission, it just happens, quietly, honestly, and sometimes when you least expect it. You said, explain part 4 in 1,000 words. Write the story, fast pace. Don't repeat things, use simple words. Write in paragraph. WRITE, only the story. Story must be good. Write the story according to YouTube monetization policies. ChatGPT said. Part 4. The choice of the heart. Months passed, and life kept moving forward. But Emma couldn't shake the quiet ache that followed her. Work, friends, and everyday moments filled her days. Yet Ethan lingered in her thoughts like a song she couldn't forget. She told herself it was just friendship, a meaningful connection that had helped her heal. But deep down, she knew her feelings had grown into something more, something she wasn't ready to name aloud. Then one morning, she received an unexpected call from St. Clair's Hospital. It was the receptionist reminding her about a follow-up checkup Dr. Ethan Cole had scheduled months ago. For a moment, she thought about canceling. Seeing him again would only stir up emotions she had tried to bury. But her heart whispered otherwise, and she found herself agreeing. The day of the appointment arrived with soft rain and gray skies. As Emma walked through the hospital corridors, memories of her time there came rushing back: the beeping machines, the soft conversations, and his steady voice telling her everything would be okay. She felt both nervous and strangely calm. When she reached his office, Ethan looked up from his desk, surprised but pleased. "Emma," he said warmly, standing to greet her. "I didn't think you'd come." She smiled faintly. "You told me to take care of myself. I'm just following doctor's orders." He laughed quietly. "I'm glad you did." The appointment went by quickly: routine questions, blood pressure checks, and a few notes on his clipboard. But beneath the small talk, there was a silence neither of them could ignore. When he finally set his pen down, he looked at her with the same calm eyes that had once made her feel safe. "You're healthy," he said softly. "Better than before." "It's good," she replied, though her heart was racing. "Thanks to you." He shook his head. "Thanks to you. You listened. You changed." There was a pause, one that carried more than medical talk. It was filled with everything unspoken between them. Ethan leaned back slightly, his expression thoughtful. "You know, when I first met you, you were exhausted, worn out. You reminded me of myself in a way, always giving, never resting." Emma met his gaze. "And now? Now you look like someone who learned how to breathe again," he said with a small smile. "I'm proud of you." She felt her throat tighten. "You were part of that. You made me see things differently." He hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Emma, can I tell you something I probably shouldn't?" Her heart skipped. "Yes." He looked down, then back at her. When I first met you, I told myself you were just another patient. But somewhere between the checkups and conversations, I started caring more than I should have. Not as a doctor, but as a person. Emma's breath caught. The room suddenly felt too quiet. Ethan. He lifted a hand gently. I know. There are rules, and I've followed them. But I also know honesty matters. You've been on my mind more than I can admit, and I think it's time I stop pretending otherwise. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. She looked at him, trying to find the right words. But emotion filled her throat. Finally, she whispered, "You're not the only one." Their eyes met, and in that look, everything was said, every late-night thought, every message, every unspoken feeling. It wasn't a confession built on impulse. It was the truth that had grown quietly between them. Ethan took a slow breath. This is complicated. I can't cross professional lines while you're still my patient. It wouldn't be right. But that doesn't mean I don't feel it. It just means we have to be careful. Emma nodded, tears glimmering in her eyes. I understand. I never expected anything. I just needed you to know that you mattered. He smiled sadly. You mattered too. More than you realize. They sat there for a while saying nothing, both knowing the moment wouldn't last forever. Then Ethan stood and walked to the window, watching the rain fall. Maybe some things aren't about timing, he said quietly. Maybe they're about connection, about meeting the right person, even if it's not the right time. Emma stood too, moving closer. Maybe the right time comes later, she said softly. He turned to her then, his expression filled with quiet warmth. Maybe. The silence between them wasn't empty, was full of everything they felt but couldn't act on. No one needed to say the word love, because it was already there, unspoken but real. When it was time for her to leave, Ethan handed her the report and said gently, You don't need more appointments. You're free to move on from here. She smiled faintly. Does that mean I'm no longer your patient? He paused, then said softly, It means you're free to live however you choose. They both knew what that meant, even if neither dared to say it directly. Outside, the rain had stopped and the air smelled fresh. Emma walked out of the hospital, her heart heavy yet peaceful. She stood on the steps for a long time, watching people pass by, the city lights glowing against the wet pavement. She thought about how far she had come from exhaustion and loneliness to this strange, beautiful place of hope and understanding. Ethan had reminded her what trust and kindness could feel like. He had taught her that love didn't always need to be loud or certain, could be quiet, patient, and real. As she looked up at the sky, the clouds began to part and a thin ray of sunlight broke through. She smiled softly to herself. Maybe love isn't about rushing, she whispered. Maybe it's about waiting for the right moment. And somewhere inside that hospital, Ethan Cole stood by the window, watching the same patch of light. He didn't know what the future held. But he knew one thing for certain: some people come into your life once and change you forever. That night, Emma sat by her window at home, her heart calm for the first time in a long while. She didn't know if she and Ethan would ever find their way back to each other, but she felt no fear in the waiting. Some stories weren't meant to be rushed. They were meant to unfold slowly, with trust and time. She reached for her phone, typed a simple message, then hesitated before sending it. It read, "Thank you for reminding me how to feel again." She pressed send, smiled through the tears, and closed her eyes. Outside, the world kept moving, but inside her heart, something had changed forever. Emma had found something she thought she'd lost a reason to believe again, to hope and to love without fear. Whether or not their paths crossed again, she knew this chapter would always stay with her, the story of a kind doctor, a fragile heart, and a connection too genuine to forget.